And we are back. And as we discussed earlier, Overwatch director Jeff Kaplan is leaving Blizzard Entertainment in the middle of developing Overwatch 2. This ruffled some feathers mostly because it could impact potentially Overwatch 2. You could have a lot of impact on a new game, especially with big leadership leaving out like that. And Overwatch fans are right to be worried. I know Kev is. Leadership in the entertainment industry can make or break a product. And tonight, we're talking about legendary leaders who have helped shape pop culture as we know today, the challenges that they face, and what makes them big bosses. First off, let's just start off with, who are some key leadership figures that you feel have shaped the video game industry and film industry as well. Jake.
I mean, the big one, obviously, the father of, or the big daddy Nintendo, Miyamoto, as far as the father of Link and Mario, and who else? And so obviously one of the best thought leaders, creators, everything all around in video game and history. Kevin Feige, man, he's been crushing it at Marvel, and I think just handing him the reins and letting him do his thing, that just goes to show what great leadership and creativity can do. And Stan Lee, Bob Lazar, those are some big ones from obviously back in the day. There were titans of industry that pretty much made a lot of the characters and things that we know and love today. And then a more recent one that I put on my list was Dan Harmon. As far as entertainment's concerned, especially with two of my favorite shows coming from the guy, Community and Rick and Morty. It's just interesting how many people he's affected, and then Solar Opposites, which is Justin Roiland, is now becoming one of my other favorite shows. I've really enjoyed.
Really good.
The second season was phenomenal in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where, and that's to me, Justin Roiland, while he's his own creative and everything like that, obviously Dan Harmon had some rub off, anyway, phrase. But Dan Harmon definitely affected him and how he thinks about things, and that's why Solar Opposites is why it's as good as it is because of people like Dan Harmon and being a leader within entertainment.
Right.
And so those are some of my big ones.
Yeah. What about you?
I gotta echo that Miyamoto pick, the first sure. Yep. No discussion there. Reggie feels aim staying in the Nintendo, right? Got all our bodies ready.
Yeah. I think recently left, I believe.
He did about a year ago. Yeah. Kind of sad about that. I mean, Nintendo's fine, but it's just having Reggie there. Seeing Reggie's face just makes me smile. I don't know why. Seeing that guy, I just get happy.
Yeah, Reggie was a good one.
Yeah. Sean Laden, former PlayStation boss. A lot of people have been there's been a lot of outcry to bring him back because they've been sort of unhappy with some of the more recent content and I guess direction with future content Sony's been going with a lot of remakes, and saying that Sean Layden's sort of philosophy was it was just about making quality content in games, where now it feels like Sony's going after a lot of cash grabs in some people's eyes. And then staying in the consoles, Phil Spencer. God, the man basically saved Xbox, because when the Xbox One was about to drop, it almost dropped right out of existence with all the shit that was going on with it being region locked, it having to be the Kinect being so integral that it won't function without it. All this other bizarre things going on, that it was always going to be an always online console. And then him coming from a PR background, shout out to Jake, and then basically just running the show at Xbox. You see where it's at now with cloud gaming and streaming, and things like even just our online service. You don't even need a membership to play free-to-play games anymore. That was all basically spearheaded by Phil Spencer.
They're moved to be more of the software that powers gaming, more so than the exclusive kind of gaming console kind of a thing. Their idea to be more inclusive, and Phil's kind of being let's roll with it. That shit. It's definitely been a game changer for Xbox. He made a good moves. I mean, Sony's making great moves too. I don't want to console war it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's just one of those where you nailed it when you said the guy who saved Xbox, because we were headed down a bad path.
Yeah, that was rough. I gotta echo the stuff on Nintendo leadership side. Even though Nintendo has made some decisions, I mean, we can pick apart Nintendo's decisions all day, and I think we actually did an episode where we did pick apart a lot of Nintendo's decisions. You should go check that out. I believe it was 64 Reasons We Love You is the name of the episode.
Early. That was an early one.
That was an early one. Yeah.
Good callback though. Good callback.
Yes. And Miyamoto and especially Reggie. I mean, I've always called Nintendo, and I said it in that episode, the Willy Wonka of games. And Reggie, for the longest time, was the closest thing to the Willy Wonka of games. He would always come out and he would be like, thanks, whoever that was that just announced. Yeah. All right, you've played video games before, but have you ever played video games where you're actually involved with your hands and they come out here and you're like, how about what if you were Link and you could throw your sword around? I'm like, I would fucking love that, Reggie. I would go crazy over that, Reggie. That's what I would do. And that's what he was like for a long time. And that was the stage presence that he had. And that's what he did for the gaming industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
there's phenomenal. Not much. Yeah. I think everyone's in agreement on that.
Yeah. I miss him. I
wish he'd come back. Right. But on the other side of things, the Whedon versus Snyder cut is a perfect example of how good leadership not only creates better art, but excites the team and attracts them towards working you in the future. What do you think the Snyder cut tells us about leadership in film?
That execs want to feel creative because their suits sometimes, right? I think
that's a big degree of it.
Yeah, you hear this all the time where it's like, oh, well, why didn't we put this in? And they're like, well, the higher ups basically said the audience, the market wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
But it's like, what do they know? Like, there's no real, there's not a metric for this. And I think they try to like make everything so quantitative that it really compromises the soul of whatever creative IP is trying to come out, right? Like that's why you see shows run on too long or they go on some like crazy ass direction. It's because somewhere upstairs the execs, instead of like checking the books and making sure the money's coming in to film it, they're like, you know what, I think we got to do we need to put some more Pepsi branding in there, we got to put this Mercedes Benz in there,
right? And
then we just gotta, make someone go in a completely different direction. Make Jon Snow completely useless now. It's gotta be. And I think they want to get too involved because they're not involved in creating it, right? And I think and you hear it a lot, like these untold stories of ego trips between like executives and the creatives.
I mean, I think it is a cliche to say execs want to feel creative because they're suits, but there is there is a 100%. An element of truth. I mean, not an element of truth to that. There's a solid truth to it. There is a capitalistic approach to creativity that I think I think Warner Brothers has suffered from it probably more than anybody else. I think that is a lot of what you can see that derailed a lot of the stuff that's going on with the DC cinematic universe. I think that what a lot of times, the decisions are made off of, well, we know this plus this equals money, so do that. Versus allowing storytellers to have the full breadth of their work, tell stories. And they're also playing, as we saw with the Whedon cut, there is a politics that they play even with the actors there, that is not just at the detriment. Before, when we didn't have instances like the Snyder cut, we never knew that we were losing that, right? We never know we lost the Snyder cut because we never saw the Snyder cut. But now that we're in a post-Snyder cut world, we can see that we have a perfect example of a situation where there was a instance where there was retribution taken on the actor that didn't just suffer the consequences of the actor, which should alone be enough to, merit what's happening to Josh Whedon now. But on the second end of it, on the other end of it, on a completely just purely content side of it, you're robbed of a lot of great content and a lot of great material and a lot of great, possibilities for this future. I want to see what Zack Snyder's plan for the DC universe could look like now because of what was available. And I had no real interest in seeing what Whedon could do. It was what Whedon could salvage, after that movie. Right. So, Jake, same question to you. What do you think the Snyder cut tells us about leadership in film?
I mean, it's kind of a lot of the same things as, I mean, the best leaders listen to their creatives. You hire good people to do good work. You don't hire them for you to do their work for them. You know what I mean? And so that's always like one of the hardest things for executives to balance is like the need to be kind of like in everything, but then also trusting the people that you brought on to do it. Right.
Right.
Like the reason why we didn't get the Snyder Cut in the first place was because WB had a leadership problem and still has a leadership problem for the most part.
They do.
Why hire insanely talented creators and then push them to do something that they didn't even want to make? That's what's the most ridiculous thing about it. It hurts the art and it hurts the audience. So no one wins in that situation. Right. And the executives think that just because they've stuck to the formula that, it's going to pump money. But here's the thing. Everything's formulaic. Don't get me wrong. The hero's journey, most everything follows that path. The story of Luke is the story of Jesus, is the story of Frodo, is the story, it's the hero's journey, right? And so that's, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but it's allowing creatives to just, flex and get in there and make what's essentially something that we've all known. We've all been told stories and they've all kind of followed this pattern, right? Yeah. Right. But to make that their own, And so that's the biggest thing is, I do got to give them kudos for noting that they fucked that up and letting the Snyder Cut become a thing, putting millions of dollars behind it, trying to kind of like, I guess, fix that issue. But, it was years later and they've already kind of said that they don't plan on letting Snyder finish his version of that universe. Like you said, the whole DC universe from Snyder's perspective, I kind of think it may be dead. Which sucks because I think the Snyder Cut did well and I think I enjoyed the Snyder Cut more. But it's just, leadership has to do better and you have to listen to your creatives. I think that's the biggest things that the Snyder Cut taught me. And it's something that I knew before, but it's just something that was so evident whenever you watched the second version of that movie and went, damn, this is 4 hours and it's literally 10 times better.
Right. And the interesting thing about it is that, to even bring back even more previous conversations we've had on Geeklife, Warner Brothers was the same people that made this big executive decision at the end of 2020 to the reason why we all saw Mortal Kombat this weekend, right? Even though some of us saw it in theaters. I think did anyone see it in theaters, or we all saw it?
I watched it. I watched Demon Slayer in theaters.
Demon Slayer in theaters, right. So but better people could see it in theaters, right? But everyone's been able to see it this weekend, right? There's no worry about it because it's available to everybody on HBO. Right. And we had so many directors that were incredibly pissed off about that because of the prestige of what they'd lost. Yeah. And, back then, especially, I was looking at that as, look at these snooty rich billionaires whining about not being able to make another yacht. And I still think that to a degree. Don't get me wrong. Okay. There's still a degree of me that's like, fuck them, Yeah. It's still a degree of me that wants to say, oh yeah, I've got a situation for that. Write this down. Get fucked. But on the other end, there is a degree of understanding that, after, if you're in a position like Zack Snyder's been in, where you've been kind of creatively ball and chained from making what the actual vision that you wanted to see, and then you see not only that, a bastardized version of it go out and really take the heat on you. It doesn't take the heat on Warner Brothers, right? It takes the heat on the director that's making that material, the leader in that situation. I can understand why they'd be mad at the people, why those bosses would be mad at the bosses above them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. And I think that's the other thing, right? For a lot of these executives, there's no real accountability, or public accountability at least, because no one's going to know who behind the scenes decided to make that decision unless some shit leaked, right? Like you said, the directors, the actors, everyone whose, face is being seen or associated or name is on it, is going to take more of the heat if it goes bad than if it goes good. And I think that's the thing. And at the end of the day, the executive's job is to make money. It's not to make a great product. Yeah. Does a great product translate to making money? Majority of the time, yes. Right. But what makes money majority of the time is great marketing and brand awareness, right? Yeah, hype. Yeah.
Every industry has its unique challenges, especially for leaders, right? What are some unique challenges that leaders in film, TV, and video games have to face, Jake?
I mean, kind of alluding to what I said earlier, you're working with creatives. So, you've got to try to sell a product that you want to reach the largest audience possible, but then also work with like people who have a definite goal of like something they want to create, and it may not like be reaching 1 million people, right?
Right.
And so like, it's honestly, to me, I think it's kind of unique to the entertainment industry because so much pop culture is being produced within its kind of like intended niche, left behind, right? Like, they're like, originally this was supposed to be made for this audience, or like Mortal Kombat may have been at one time just something for like a movie for gamers to go see, right? Like people who actually only liked Mortal Kombat. Somewhere around the line, though, they thought like, we have to make this movie appeal to more people. Like it can't just be for the gamers. We can't just go by like the game story. Same thing happens a lot of times in comic book movies, anything like that, where like, the original comic's better than whatever bullshit movie they made from it. If they just would have stuck to what the original creative made, than trying to get crazy with it. But, they kind of have to try to balance, like, are you creating something for millions, or do you create something for less people, but with a more hardcore fan base, right? Like, kind of like people who are much more closer to it. And so I think, not that many industries have to satisfy core groups of people and then also sell to millions of people at the same time. Because they're trying their best to say, okay, here's fan service for the real people that love this shit. But then also here's a movie that you can go see with your friends on a Friday, for like people who may not be into it, right? And so, but some people do fucking great at it. Look at Deadpool. I think that's a great example of one that like even the fans of the comic were like, this is good. And then even like normal Joe that had never heard of fucking Deadpool went, this is good. Like, and so it's just one of those where like, when it's good, And so, but I think that's one of the big unique challenges that, the entertainment, TV, movies, video games, they all face that, where they're making something to make millions of dollars because that's the goal. But then they're also trying to make something for a small niche of people that are going to enjoy it, but then also tons of other people who may be more casual.
Right. Kev, what same question to you. What are some challenges that the entertainment industry faces as far as leadership goes?
Yeah, I think kind of echoing off what Jake was saying, where it's like, how do you find the balance between making sure that you're going to capitalize on this as much as possible without compromising the creativity of the people you put in place to execute like the perfect vision for this, whatever content you're trying to put out. And I think that's where you see a lot of sort of, weird shit that goes on, like hiring, making M. Night Shyamalan the director of the Avatar movie. Or, like there's these weird, wacky decisions that you see where it's like
triggered.
All right, yeah. Where it's like, who thought this was a good idea? And I also think, making sure that you don't you got to balance meeting fans' expectations, but at the same time not compromising your own vision. Because I think sometimes when you involve the fans too much, things get kind of crazy and go in every single different direction, right? That's kind of what I thought happened with Arrow in a way as well. They started like at first I was fine with him just wearing like the oil paint mask and like some other shit, because they were putting like I was never like. Green Arrow was cool, but that was it. But Arrow was amazing. Like when those first 2 seasons came out, because it had its own identity and it was somewhat separating itself a little bit from, because he's always been analogous with Batman for the most part, right?
Right.
I think that's just.
I could go on a big speech about the big philosophical difference between Green Arrow and Batman, but
but I mean on paper, right? Or on the eye test, right? They're both billionaires with no superpowers. But I think but it's just, you start getting into like these things where it's like I think you have to figure out what the soul, like especially if you're doing a remake or adaptation of something, right? Whether it's anime or a video game or something, you got to figure out what the soul of this is, what makes this special, what makes people love it, and then how do we express that in the best way possible. And a lot of times that happens, and when it does happen, it's great, but when it doesn't happen, it's bad, and you get movies like the Mortal Kombat movie or the Monster Hunter movie. And I'm going to use a lot of video game movies because that seems to be a recurring theme here in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, that's what they do. They make us fall in love with a game, and then they go, let's get a movie version of this. but then let's hire the worst director possible to fit this
And it's
movie.
never like the Assassin's Creed movie made no sense. And they have the content there. Literally,
Yeah.
it's copy and paste.
I
Find the
get it.
actors, find the director. And they just like, what if we had a machine that, kind of made them go back?
There's very few movies I can think of that have been made after games that have been successful. I think Detective Pikachu is one that stands out. I think
Detective Pikachu's
Sonic.
a banger.
Sonic the Hedgehog, I heard was good.
Sonic the Hedgehog?
I
Maybe.
like Sonic. I mean,
I'll have to see
they
it. I'll have
definitely
to see
had
it. I
to
haven't seen it
redo
yet.
him. The first
But
version
then again,
of Sonic
that's
was
the
a
thing,
nightmare.
because fans were like, what the fuck
Right.
is this?
Why'd you give him teeth?
Yes.
But then you have to think, like, was that because Nelly said something in chat earlier about like how they have a lot of work meetings, and it's incredible how many people who aren't designers try to tell designers how to do their jobs. How much money would you want to put that it was a fucking suit that went, he needs to have more normal teeth.
Yeah, he needs to look more
1000%.
realistic.
He needs to look more realistic.
And then
the designer,
as a designer, I totally understand that.
and the designer
I know
went,
that had to happen.
wait, you want me to give him more realistic teeth? And
Yeah.
the guy was like, yeah, let's change him up a bit. Let's make him
Right.
Sonic, and
Right,
you're like,
yeah.
oh,
Sonic.
God. Like,
We need to do a TikTok on that.
Yeah, we
but,
did.
That's
but yeah,
good-
no, like
that's
that
good
was
material.
a suit. You can tell
Yeah.
decisions like that. And then when they redid it, you were like, that's probably what the guy, that's
Because of-
ballpark. That's ballpark what he probably originally pitched.
Right.
And-
because of
and
course
somebody
the
said,
fucking
change it.
graphic designer who modeled and rendered Sonic knows what Sonic looks like. Like he's
Exactly.
not gonna, or she's
Exactly.
not gonna fuck that up. Like,
Yeah.
Like, somebody came in and gave pointers on how to change Sonic and said,
Right.
give him real people teeth. And,
Yeah.
and did it because, shit, you're a designer, somebody who makes twice the, like came in and told you
Yeah.
to give him real teeth. So
Right,
you're like,
right.
fuck it. Like this guy has a
Still
parking
getting
spot
paid.
here. Yeah, I'm getting paid. I'm going to make you have real teeth.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's that.
One thing that just came to mind, though, there's kind of on a scale of the polarity between being open and listening to other people and the customer base, and just being open to other ideas in general, and kind of having everything in your head kind of sorted out, and having a plan, especially in the entertainment industry, for a franchise, for a product, for a production of some sorts. There's benefits and weaknesses to both, right? You can see with the Snyder Cut, the being receptive to the fans was something that's paid off for them in the long run. It's really benefited Warner Brothers. And now that we see this as a possibility, we go, okay, we can vocalize these things, and maybe we can possibly initiate changes in Warner Brothers to get them to create the kind of products that we want them to create. And listening to, Cyberpunk, that's another example of people actually listening to, feedback and being receptive to it. And so we've seen this kind of
pushing a product that wasn't finished.
That's true. Yes, that's also true as well. But we've seen at least some sense of leadership being receptive to the public. But we also, on the other hand, I remember Miyamoto, one leader that we talk about a lot. He has talked about a lot of times why he hasn't implemented a lot of basic features, like why isn't the original 150 in every Pokemon game? Why isn't this kind of thing out there? And he answered one time that if I gave the fans exactly what they wanted every single time, then we would just have remakes of Red and Blue over and over and over again.
That's very
And so that there has to be some kind of independent decision making on their part, where it is a little bit separate from the fans' feedback. If you remember when Sword and Shield came out, to even talk about Pokemon in general, there was a huge blowback on it because it wasn't going to include all 800 or nearly 900 Pokemon in there, and we've got fucking like 600 or 800, like 200 short of all of them, and like the people were acting like it was going to blow up the franchise, but actually staying steady on that course and saying no, even with Dexit, as Little Nelly points out in chat, we're still going to continue on with this franchise, led them to producing Sword and Shield, which is only outsold by Red and Blue, the original ones that have about a 25-year head start on them. So when you put all that together, there's a kind of a balance between being kind of steadfast in your decision making and being receptive to the public. In 2021, what side of that spectrum do you need to lean more on? Jake, we'll start with you.
I mean,
It's a tough question.
well, I definitely think like you got to be receptive to the fans, in some aspect, because things like Sonic, they were able to change that franchise around just by listening to the fans. And so like, you got to give people what they want, but you can't give them exactly what they want, because honestly, people don't know what they want. That's the biggest thing too. Yeah. As a person who has helped made apps and other things like that in the past, like people think they know what they want, but you got to really give them, right? Like Zuckerberg always had this crazy quote about how when they pushed the actual news feed, that was like everybody hated it. Everybody was talking about like, what is this news feed? I don't like it. What's this whole thing? But Zuck said, we already knew you wanted it because we saw it in the data. Like you said you didn't want it, but you didn't realize that's what you wanted. And so they had to just tweak it a little bit. And over the years, now it's like that's Facebook. The news feed is Facebook. It's no longer me going to your page. People may not remember that. I just aged myself so hard, by the way. When you first had Facebook, I would have to go to Dotson's page to see his post. Because when I logged into Facebook, I was on my page.
Right. And so thoroughly enjoying Mortal Kombat stoned right now.
Yeah. And so like, anyway, like I definitely think you got to listen to the fans because, to an extent, but you also have to create your own thing, and you've got to do what you got to give people what you think, like what they want, right? Because like as most of the time creatives, they're coming to see you make something, right? Like like if Picasso had made every painting the same thing over and over again, would people have kept buying them? Obviously he wanted to change it up a bit, and so but kept the same style. So anyway,
Kev, same question to you. On the spectrum of steadfast to being open to reception, where do you need to lay more on as a leader, or where do you put yourself as a leader in 2021?
Yeah, I think I like what Jake said, where it's like you gotta balance, like, and I'll harken back to what I was saying earlier, like understanding the soul of what you're making and how to best execute that without too much influence. Because there's a saying that you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen. That's what happens oftentimes with these things. And I think once you, like Jake was saying, once you get somebody that you put in power to run this ship, to captain this helm, you got to trust that decision. Like your job as an exec is already done. That's all you got to do. Like you hired this person for like you don't need to be micromanaging and getting involved in every single step of the process. That's how these things get messy and screwed up. That's how you get Sonic with teeth. So. And same thing with like listening to the fans, because like you were saying, where it's like you'll just have remakes, repeats, and you'll just be battling for whose nostalgia are you going to tickle this time, right? Like you have to figure out a way, and that's the thing. Like you're going to have to make sacrifices and compromises. Like you're not going to be able to make every single body. You're not going to be able to make everyone happy, right? Because you won't ever create anything new. And I think that's the thing where you got to be like, okay. People gravitate more towards this. We want to do something innovative. I'll use Mario games as an example, right? Like, I haven't heard anyone really say anything about a Mario game, really. It's because they stick to what they know, but they're also not afraid to, like, do something crazy. Like, Mario in space, Mario with a water backpack, Mario traveling the world, like, and...
Mario's a T-Rex.
Right. But they don't fuck up and like make Mario like 6'5", jacked. No one's trying to make CW Mario.
They don't give him teeth.
Even in Mario's fighting games, he's still Mario.
He's still
like they don't ever change him up.
The soul of what he is intact, but they just figure out a way to express it in a creative way that they want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dealing with fans, it gets tricky because like I said, people, they may think they know what they want. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do. Yeah. And even if you give them that, they're still not going to be happy. So
right. You just can't listen to everybody. That's the thing. You got to trust your gut.
Like with everything in life, including hard drugs, it's all about moderation, kids.
Exactly. Well, we talked about some of the challenges leaderships face, but what makes for good leadership in the entertainment industry? But what are some examples of bad bosses? Are there any leaders out there that you think really left the franchise worse than when they got in?
Yeah, so I'm not going to name any specific names. I'll just name organizations. EA and Activision gets in there too. EA literally cannibalizes itself by killing game studios that they absorb and IPs. Like there's so many great game developers and games that were out there that existed, got bought by EA, and literally they don't exist anymore. And they just keep making Madden and FIFA
Yeah.
and a crappy Star Wars game with a great Star Wars game every 20 years or so, or however long they've had.
And they still won't give me NFL Street. Like, Jesus Christ,
right?
Bro. I have been waiting so long.
Oh my god, NFL, yeah, and that's the thing. Like EA, and they did the shit with, and I pick on EA because they've ruined one of my favorite game franchises, Mass Effect. And you know, and ruined a game where you basically got to be RPG Iron Man. You know, they can't seem to get out of their own way, and this is where you see, where I was talking about earlier, where they're trying to, where you have to balance, you know, capitalizing and then creativity. Saw it with the loot boxes, the egregious loot box system that is in just about every single one of their games, and they get shit for it. Like they don't have a lot of great games, and it's for good reason. It's because their number one priority is we're gonna make money first, and at the end of the day, it's working for them because they have these sort of, you know, it's like a consumable product almost, where it's like you could live. Like, I'll break it down to you like this. And matter of fact, I'm gonna throw 2K actually in there. 2K, you're not unscathed from this either, given recent events. The sports games, Madden and NBA 2K could literally be a free to play game that is just upgraded with content every season or so, but they won't do it. And they won't do it because they know they're going to sell a $60 game every single year, and then people are going to pour close to $100+ sometimes even more, into these games in microtransactions. And
I mean, it's
I've done it a lot.
We talk about it all the time.
Yeah, me too, and I'm ashamed of myself.
I've given them more money than I probably should have.
And Activision too, because of Call of Duties. Like we already know. And
Activision's right in there in that bucket
Destiny.
too.
A lot of people don't know they fucked Bungie up. That's why Bungie left, and Destiny's great now. Like, you see that. Like, that's a great example of like the stark contrast between what happened when Activision had their greasy, clutchy hands on Bungie, as opposed to when Bungie got their soul back and left. And now apparently Destiny's amazing.
Yeah, I've heard good things.
I've heard good things as well. Jake, same question to you.
I mean, I got to think if we're talking about leaders that have left a franchise worse than when they got it, Fox ruined the Fantastic Four. I feel like every Marvel, any superhero fan in general, if you probably ask them like who are the worst heroes in the universe, they'd be like, oh, the Fantastic Four fucking suck. And it's like, no, they don't. Like, they're cool characters. They have cool backgrounds. Like, they're really entwined in the whole universe. And it just sucks that Fox has never given up their clutches on that bad boy, because it's like, you know, and but a lot of people don't know that Lucas and Spielberg co-founded or co-came up with the idea of Indiana Jones. When the Crystal Skull was going to come out, it was because of Lucas. So Lucas was wanted, like, you know, to keep going with Indiana Jones, while Spielberg was like, nah, man, like, let's not do it. And so I was going to blame Lucas for almost ruining Indiana Jones. And
you're saying you didn't like the Crystal Skulls, I'm guessing.
No, I didn't.
I mean, you could look at George Lucas arguably in a lot of negative lights here. I mean, he sold the rights to Star Wars, and then that was after the sequel series. Yeah. And then we got the prequel series, and then we got the sequel series, which was been awful. Yeah. And I mean, the only thing that's really been saving it is Jon Favreau and The Mandalorian. Yeah. That's really that and Rogue One. You know, and honestly, the reason Mandalorian is doing well is because of the things that were set up in Rogue One. So, you know,
Sony simultaneously put Spider-Man on the map and then almost killed it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You know, like they were one of the few companies that like took a franchise and said, "Yo, we're gonna make it established," and really helped get Spider-Man established. You know, those early movies, some of the games they made, stuff like that, fantastic. Spider-Man 2 was fucking awesome.
Influential in superhero movies in general.
Game, by the way, Spider-Man 2, the video game, fucking awesome. Anyway, and so like, you know, they really, you know, kind of got it on the map. And then the Amazing Spider-Man, especially the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like, what the fuck were they doing there?
A lot
so,
of
like,
things.
yeah, I know, right?
A
And
lot of
then
things that
I'm gonna
weren't
go
really
back with
working
Bungie
together.
also, because when Bungie gave up the reins to 343 for Halo, or essentially, whenever that whole thing went down,
Yep.
I was like, that's the beginning of the end for Halo, and it kind of was in a way. And so we're gonna have to see what they do on this one. Maybe they redeem themselves on a new Halo. But like the first 3, I believe, were made by Bungie, and those are hands down everyone's favorite Halo games by far.
Yeah,
and
the first
so,
3 and Reach were made by Bungie, and then everything else 4, 5
was
all
343 and
343
Studios or whatever.
Which is funny because they made a game called Halo Wars, which is actually kind of fun. I like RTSs.
Halo Wars, yeah.
I do like
I haven't
RTSs.
played Halo Wars before, but RTSs are fun. I haven't gotten a chance to play one in a long time, and that would be fun.
That was a good one. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. But yeah, like Jake is saying, like Bungie's kind of they try to come out unscathed, like in a way they seem victimized, where it's like, oh no, we're being run astray by executives. But I mean, dude, you chose to leave Microsoft so you didn't have to make Halo games. You wanted to make something new, and then you signed with Activision so they can fund Bungie, or so they can fund Destiny. Like, you chose to do that. Like,
you chose that.
Yeah, you chose that.
Yeah. A big thing to remember is the classic saying, "There's no I in team," right? Obviously, a bigger corporation gets usually there's more decisions made by a group or a full team of executives. What do you guys believe are some solid examples of companies that made great industry leaders?
Yeah.
Jake.
That's a good question. I mean, Nintendo, obviously, we've been blowing smoke up Nintendo this whole time. If you're talking about an industry leader that trusts its creatives and really leans into being a little zany at times, Nintendo, right? Like those guys, they've never been afraid to innovate. And I've always, I feel like it's a company that, like, I mean, I don't own a ton of stock in, but when I first started like going like, oh, I want to learn about stocks and stuff, I bought some Nintendo stock because I was like, I like Nintendo. As a company, I like them, I dig them. And so, that's an obvious one. I believe the most part, they've pretty much just let creatives do what they do best, which is create. And I mean, Disney is a tough one. I think they've been a pretty good daddy to Marvel. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I think they've kind of let Marvel do its thing. Like, I know a lot of people were really concerned whenever Disney bought Marvel. But what's happened? We've gotten more Marvel entertainment movies and shows and everything than we ever had before.
Right,
and
but Star Wars.
Huh?
Right, but Star Wars.
I mean, yes, those have been bad. But I would have to talk to someone who had never watched Star Wars. Like, how did they take these new trilogy? Because it wasn't made for me in a way. Right. Like, it was kind of like Disney was trying to get more people.
Right.
And so,
but a lot of people who don't have the history with Star Wars like the sequels.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so I mean, I gotta say, Disney's been a pretty good daddy to Marvel. It's they've been letting Kevin Feige do pretty much whatever he wants.
I think we said his name differently each time.
Yeah, probably. I mean, if he ever like, hopefully he'll just comment how it's pronounced in chat. I thought I saw it on Wikipedia as Feige or Feige.
I thought it's
Feige. Maybe Feige. Okay, yeah. Anyway,
I'm not quite sure either.
Well, anyway, it's Kevin. Feige. I'm gonna start calling him Kevin.
Just Kev.
Kevin.
Kev,
you won't know if we're talking about Kev on the show or Kevin Feige.
Kevin F.
Feige. Feige. Anyways, Kevin, same question to you though. Not Kevin Feige, the Kev on the show. What are some good companies that made industry leaders?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go off. I'm gonna again Nintendo again. Right, because I feel like growing up, and even in most cases, like Nintendo was almost, maybe not now, but at the point, Nintendo was basically like the like Band-Aids and Kleenex of their industry, right? Where like that was what you called a video, or someone uninitiated would call a video game. Oh, you're playing your Nintendo, even though you're like playing a PlayStation or Sega or something, No,
they legit.
Like that's how. Yeah.
Were. Like, have you ever heard that story? Do you know that? That's a real thing in branding and marketing. I learned it in college.
What?
Like Nintendo. So Kleenex and oh my God, I know we're running over, but so Kleenex and things like that, like they risked, and Band-Aid was a big one too. A lot of these corporations risked actually losing their copyrights because they're called like normal products, right? So like it's called hand sanitizer, but everyone says Germex. So like
Right.
no matter what the name or brand of that hand sanitizer is, a lot of people will go, "Do you have any Germex?" And it'll
Like
be
in
like,
the
"Yeah."
South, people call everything a Coke. Like,
Exactly.
oh yeah, like
in
can I
the
get a
South,
Coke?
everybody calls
It's like, oh,
everything
is Pepsi
Coke.
okay? It's like, yeah, I said a Coke.
Everyone would
Yeah.
call a tissue Kleenex. Like, do you have a
Right.
Kleenex? And so Kleenex and a lot of corporations like that, they run this huge issue, which is like, once it becomes kind of like a common word, knowledge or whatever, you can
Yeah.
lose your copyrights on that.
Yeah.
And so there was this whole thing where I think like Nintendo actually pushed to like have the word video game or like home console and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like they actually like pushed marketing campaigns for that so that people wouldn't call other gaming consoles Nintendos.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
were like, we don't want to lose our rights. And so
Yeah.
anyway, sorry. I know I got on a small tangent, but it's a cool branding story.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
It
like
is.
that.
It
Like
is.
that's one. Like if someone's like is in a gamer or is like wants to do it casually or wants to get in video games, like I would just always suggest a Nintendo console. Like it's a great start. I mean, it's not only
Yeah.
just a great start, but it's just something great to have. Like it's so universal. And now I would say, you know, Marvel for sure, and again back to Xbox. I think like just the evidence. I use these as an example. I want to use like examples of just sort of steady growth and consistency. I think that's why Nintendo makes a list, and then also taking something on the brink of destruction and then turning it around. Right. That's why I use Xbox like Phil Spencer.
All right. Yeah. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'll I think wrap it up for our conversation on Final Boss leadership in the entertainment industry. Those are absolutely great examples. I think that you could talk about. I think some examples in TV. You know, CW obviously establishing the superhero TV universe. I think is a good leadership.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
has that leadership been maintained? I'd argue probably not, but
they did
you know,
start that pendulum though. They made that swing. They were kind of
They
one of the
definitely
first
started
like
it.
major TV, you know, kind of thing. Well, you know, semi-major, I guess, basic cable, right? And so they were just
Yeah.
like, hey, let's make superhero shows. I mean, because before the Flash and Arrow and stuff like that, we really didn't have a lot. And then
Yeah.
Netflix was like, oh, Daredevil, dare I
Yeah.
say, you know, and like,
right.
and
It
now
just
look at
kind of
us.
snowballed from there.
Every week we're like, fucking Disney, give me more, you know? Like,
Yeah, and now
You
we're
know?
talking about Disney Plus series about
Yeah.
you know MCU characters that are involved in TV series. So
Yeah.
you know, I think that's one to arguably talk about. But anyways, that'll wrap it up for our deep dive discussion on Final Boss.